to the republic
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
All right, we're trying to get that in sync remotely. It's not easy. As far as I know, Chanel, there were no comments from citizens to read.
That is correct, Craig. No public comment.
Okay, and again, we encourage that, and we have read those in advance of the meetings, and so I continue to ask folks to contribute their thoughts with no notice from citizens. We can go right to the chairman's update. A couple things. Not so much for today, but you'll likely get an invite to a special meeting sometime in the next week to 10 days around some of the contract sign-up we have to do as we transfer from the city to the county funding source. So we hope to have some of that paperwork ready for today. It wasn't, but we'll get that to you in advance of any meetings so you have a chance to look at it. So some more to come, but be on the lookout from an invitation from Chanel for that. Also looks like, based on some comments that were made at the Wasson Way next phase opening, that some progress is potentially being made on the Oasis Bike Trail path, the one that was proposed for the rail tracks, to which we own the right of way coming out of the Montgomery Boathouse area. So more to come, I think, probably at the next meeting on that phase too. So if you see anything in the public, not really any responsibility for us, just to make sure that we don't get liability as a result. Trying to think. The other thing, two additions to the agenda. The policy committee met. We didn't have an update on here because there's no action items, but we'll ask Glenn to give us a little update there. And the Cincinnati Mobility Lab, which was this combination of the Chamber and OKI and Uber and Tank and Lyft and such, has come up with some research findings that they published. So we asked them to give us a brief update on the release that they've done in the paper they've created. So we'll get a little bit of that toward the end of this meeting as well. Any questions on anything for me? No. All right, then why don't we go to the action items. The first item is approval of the board minutes from June 16th, 2020. We have those up, I guess. Hopefully folks had a chance to look at them and review. If there aren't any questions, I'm open to motion to approve.
So moved. That was Blake.
That was Blake.
Second.
All right. Was that Kathy seconded?
Yeah, second. Happy.
Thank you, Kathy. So motion properly moved and seconded. Any questions? No, I know, Chanel, let's do rolls just for everything, right?
Yes. Okay. Mrs. Black. Yes. Mr. Cole. Mr. Etheridge.
Yes.
Mr. Freeman. Mr. Hinton.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kissy.
Yes.
Mr. McLendon.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson. Yes. And Ms. Wynette. Yes.
Okay, so moved. The Finance Committee and Planning Committees met, so we'll turn it over to Heidi.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The Finance Committee met last Tuesday. The majority of our meeting was focused on getting a report and kind of an update on our annual audited financial statements, which really was just kind of a draft and a preview of the work. There were no major concerns from our auditors. They complimented the SORTA staff on adjusting the things that had been found in the audit last year. And so that was nice to hear about the speed in which SORTA's executive leadership team is responding to what's found in an audit. But that was really just the big thing. We looked at financial reports, we looked at the investment of funds. I know Michelle will be talking about that a little bit later. Michelle, is there anything around the audit that was shared in the finance committee meeting that you'd like to talk about here?
No, just one follow-up item because it was still in draft form. I've reached out to the auditors and we spoke late last week to make sure there was still everything was moving smoothly and there was no additional findings. And at this point in time, there's no additional findings and we continue to expect a clean audit.
So kudos to everyone working on that. I was really impressed all the way around.
Thank you.
That's all. It's nice. It's complicated. I think the big, recent year changes around how you have to account for healthcare and such, and pension liabilities is a little tricky. But so thanks to the team for that. Okay, Brendan, are you on? Says you are, but says you're on mute. So. Perhaps we'll go. Gwen, why don't you give a quick update on the policy committee while we see?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone who attended the meeting and thank TJ and the staff for the work that they did in getting us prepared for the meeting. And just briefly, historically, we were Council Committee as a result of the request that we received from the city, the mayor, and the city manager to transport detainees. And there were some who, from the board, questioned, do we have a policy basically, or do we need board approval? So it's a committee that came out of a need at that time, but it is also one that we probably needed anyway. So it was a good thing for us that now is the time. TJ did a lot of research, and interesting enough, most of the systems do not have a policy on using their use of their buses. And so we ended up, I think there are three buckets that our committee is going to look at. And one is a request for use of our buses. Secondly is disaster emergency use of our buses. And then thirdly, operating during a curfew. TJ also, is going to, or is developing a policy, a SOP or a standard of operation policy for how we use our rolling stock. So it was basically a briefing, and Daryl, feel free to step in or whatever. But it was a briefing getting us to a point where we will come out with a consistent and detailed policy that we will use unilaterally. As you know, we get all kinds of requests for the buses, including providing Wi-Fi for our students, and we've all transported during special events. So we need to make a policy. It's almost like it's not a universal policy, but it is a policy that we all can agree upon, and we will share it with the public when we've completed. If there's something else that I need to share, feel free. Daryl?
You did a great job, Gwen.
Last minute. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's critical, right? Obviously, this isn't something that's had to come to the board historically, but I think the recent activities, it makes sense that it does, and that we have guidance for what we expect from the administration. It'll get more complicated, obviously, as funding source changes and there's more jurisdictions involved. So I think great work, but forward to seeing what we have back to the board. Okay, planning and ops.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I couldn't hear quickly enough before. I am looking on the screen. It still says finance. Here we go, planning and operations. As usual, John gave us some good news, which was terrific. I encourage all of you to look in your minutes for those good news report. Matt gave us a ridership report, starting to see some increase back to riding, but we don't expect to see that fully until after the next month, when we will have been up and running for a month. There were two proposed resolutions. Both were on the consent agenda. One is a software maintenance agreement, and the other is a pest control agreement that were fairly simple resolutions to deal with. So both of them would require, or we could have one vote on the consent agenda. And I would move that we do that.
Okay. Any seconds for that?
Second, Blake.
Okay, thanks again, Blake. So properly moved and seconded. Any questions on either the Maximo software maintenance agreement or the pest control? No? Okay. Then why don't we go to the roll call?
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Etheridge,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mr. Hinton,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffmeister,
Yes.
Mr. Cassie,
Yes.
Mr. McLendon,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Wynette. Yes.
Okay, so moved. And anything else, Brendan? Or?
That was my report.
And I think you said back and forth.
Just a question.
Sure.
All right, just a question. And Daryl, I bring it up every time, and I know that I'm not sure what is our policy to include WBEs in any of our procurement. And so, would it be possible to have your procedure or your protocols for doing that?
Yes, we can put something together and make a presentation on that. We'd love to do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it was unfortunate on the pest control, right? I think we sent out 75 requests and only had one company bid on it, which I guess doesn't seem to be that exciting of an opportunity for folks, but we want to continue to push, right? I'd also say, Brendan, I think you said that we'll return to full ridership. I think you meant full service, right? Happening in the month.
I mean, I'm a hopeful, optimistic kind of guy, Craig, so I'd like to think that we'll be back to full ridership soon, but yes, I meant full service.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll double next week, and that'll be terrific. So
thank you for your precision in language, Mr. Chair.
I try. Okay. Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Behind tab 4, you will find the month of June financial report. The total revenue was $7.3 million, was unfavorable to budget by $728,000. Total expenses of $9.3 million was unfavorable to budget by $857,000. Deficit for the month before using the CARES funds to balance was $2,006,000. Funds from the CARES Act of $2,006,000 were used to balance the operating results in June. The total operating results before balancing with available funds were unfavorable by $1,585,000, or 377% for the month, and unfavorable $3,265,000, or 129% year to date. Some of the most significant factors driving the results for June was fair revenue, which was unfavorable to budget by $712,000, or 49%. Non-transportation revenue was unfavorable to budget by $77,000, primarily due to investment income and advertising income. State subsidies was unfavorable to budget by $37,000, or 16%, due to reduced diesel fuel purchases for the month, which resulted in lower reimbursement from the Ohio fuel sales tax, and the unfavorable revenue is almost entirely offset by a favorable fuel tax expense. Employee wages and benefits was unfavorable to budget by $954,000, primarily due to the $1.3 million of hero pay in the month. Parts and supplies was favorable by $127,000, primarily due to lower than anticipated revenue vehicle parts expense of $140,000. During the Finance Committee, there was a question regarding the impact of returning to full service and if we didn't pay the hero pay during the month of June. If SORTA did not pay the hero's pay, employee wages and benefits would have been favorable by $346,000. And the deficit before available funds would have been $700,000. We returning to full service will add approximately 1.2 to 1.3 million expenses. So we would expect to see a deficit of approximately $2 million a month before using CARE funds going forward. Anybody have any questions on the financials for June month end?
Thanks, Michelle. I know that was my question. I guess the other thing is we don't, as we've said before, we don't include depreciation and things in these costs. Because keeping up with capital would be another couple $1 million a month.
That's correct.
So the deficit sort of gets into that $3.5–4 million a month type of
Correct.
discussion. Versus ridership doesn't.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So, could you just give us a brief update again on how the CARES Act funds work? They seem really important to the financials right now. Maybe not all the details, but yeah, just give us a little update on how it works.
Sure, absolutely. So the CARES funds, we are able to request reimbursement for any operating expenses incurred since January 20th of this year. So any operating expenses going forward, so we can request those funds. We have up to $34 million to use, and it's all based off of reimbursement of expenses we've incurred. But it's only operating expenses.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have any other questions on that, Blake, or is that clear enough?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle? I know, on looking at next year, right, and what the sales tax forecast will mean, and then how that impacts reinventing Metro rollout. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that at the August board meeting. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
That would be great.
Yeah, it's obviously the number, it's not going to be perfect, but we'll do the best we can and think about it. And that's really why all these dollars are so important, right? Because every dollar lost now is one we don't have to invest getting that up and running.
Do we have any update on what the city decided to do with the transit fund?
That will happen, I think, in the August board meeting, and that's why we want to have this discussion about the sort of final handoffs beforehand. So that's why the need for the special meeting that I comment. So they haven't taken the money. I mean, the money's still there at this point. Okay. If no other questions there, are we going to the study before we go to Daryl?
We can do either, if you like, Craig.
Take it away. Just make sure you leave a couple minutes for Daryl.
Is that to me?
Yep, that's you, Pete.
Thank you. I haven't been with all of you since we passed a levy together, so thank you all. It feels like a long, long, long time ago, but thank you for all of your work. And I want to go back a few years, and I'm going to hand the bulk of this over to Andy from Fair and Peers, but I wanted to talk briefly about the Cincinnati Mobility Lab, which some of you were on the board when this was created, others were, and it really stemmed from a conversation that Mary Miller, who I think I see her initials on this call, had and helped us create a partnership that's really was the first of its kind in the country to figure out how could rideshare companies like Uber serve as partners for cities and for transit agencies. And there were a number of deliverables that we were hoping to get out of this. But the biggest piece of it was the ability to share data between the rideshare companies who keep their data in real tight lock boxes, and there were others as well. So the study that you're going to hear from Andy about is really the culmination of that data sharing effort and talks a bit about ways that this integration can work. One other way that this integration and really in practical application can work is that starting later this month, and this is a huge credit to Daryl and his team and Andy Aiello at Tank, you all recently moved into the space to be able to use the transit app for mobile ticketing. By the end of this month, you'll also be able to open the Uber app and see an Uber X or an Uber Black or anything else, but you'll also be able to see transit as an option in there. And you'll be able to purchase transit tickets for SORTA and for Tank and for 11 other transit systems across the state of Ohio right there in the Uber app. And we think that's a way to capture ridership who maybe we know is looking for a non-driving alone mode of transportation, and see that the service that SORTA is providing is competitive and cost effective and meets the need. And so they'll be able to buy their ticket right there in the Uber app, show it to a driver, and get on the bus and go. And so I'm really excited about that. That's a huge rollout for the state of Ohio. It was driven locally by SORTA and Tank, taking it to the Neo Ride Consortium. So that's a big win, and one of the things we talked a lot about 3 years ago when we launched this partnership. But I want to give the rest of the time over to Andy Kaczynski, who's with Fair and Peers, who can give a little bit more of his background. He's the expert on this study that the teams have been working on for the last nearly 3 years, and so I'm eager for him to share the findings with you all. So, Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today to present our findings on the potential future for on-demand transit in Cincinnati. My presentation is about 12 or 13 minutes long here. I'm happy to take questions at the end. And my name is Andy Kaczynski. I'm an associate transportation planner with Fair and Peers out of Oakland, California. Fair and Peers, we're a transportation consulting firm headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area with 250 employees, mainly on the West Coast. And most of my work is to support transit agencies and municipalities throughout California. So the context of this study is that the car is king and transit continues to be in trouble. So broadly speaking, over the past decade, and this is true for most regions in the country, population has been increasing, economic output has been increasing, BMT has been increasing, yet bus ridership has continued to decline, as you can see in this chart. In fact, transit ridership in Cincinnati has been downsliding for over 50 years, and indeed by several thousand trips per day between 2014 and 2018. So transit is at around 30,000 trips per day right now when you account for both Metro and Tank. Uber, on the other hand, arrived on the scene in 2014 and has seen steady growth now at around 10,000 trips per day on average. And Lyft also operates in Cincinnati. We don't quite have their usage statistics. Of course, these statistics are pre-COVID.
We should point out that transit was actually starting to increase in Q1 of this year.
Yeah, the macro, absolutely. Yeah.
We just like to say that every time we get a chance.
Yeah.
And so for us, this kind of prompts the question, key question of the study, go to the next slide, can on-demand play a part in the long-term, reversing of that ridership trend? So what is on-demand? Well, we define it as really anything ranging from ride hail such as Uber or an Uber pool to more microtransit option, which is a flexible ride shuttle service. And this ridership reversal could happen in a couple of different ways. One, on-demand providers. Could you slow a little bit, Pete? On-demand providers could directly partner with transit agencies to supplement or replace certain fixed route services, and just the availability of these on-demand services could also complement transit trips because they're both part of this bundle of modes that can replace the automobile. So anything that strengthens that bundle can help transit succeed. First off, our data, and as Pete says, we've got a lot of good data as part of the study, shows that transit and Uber are not in heavy competition with one another. 4 out of 5 Uber riders have access to a car. The bottom line is that most Uber trips are taken by people with an option to drive. That's not the case for transit. We found that Uber is generally used for edge cases where driving simply makes less sense, such as when parking costs are high at the airport, downtown, for example, or to avoid driving under the influence. Each Uber trip is more likely to replace a car trip than a bus trip. And furthermore, we asked 1,000 Uber riders, what mode would you have taken for that trip prior to Uber being available? Only 13% of those respondents said bus. So it's one example of how the modes are used differently. And we really were able to dig into a few more key stats that I'll share today. Next slide. For example, how does usage change by time of day? This chart shows the bus, Metro plus Tank in blue, and Uber in orange. You can see that in terms of passenger trips per hour during these different times of the week, transit is huge on the weekday and outweighs Uber. Uber comes into its own really on the evenings, weekday evening and especially on weekends. Like, for example, on Saturday evening, there's quite a bit more Uber travel happening in this region than transit travel. Next slide. Here I want to step through a few maps that show like aggregate travel patterns in the region over the course of a typical day. So I'm going to compare three different modes side by side: auto, transit, and Uber for the region. The thickness of the green lines here show number of car trips between throughout the region across the zones. And you can see like the CBD here in Cincinnati, it's not particularly prominent for car travel. It's just typical because, there's very much a multipolar job market in the region, and there's a lot of automobile travel between and within suburbs. So next, I'll show transit. Pete, I guess that slide not able to show the other two images.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a step through. I don't know if the PowerPoint would open and show that for the two other modes of transportation.
Well, I can characterize it, just knowing that we're not able to see those right now, and of course they're in the report. But compared with auto travel, transit is very much concentrated in certain corridors near downtown and the adjacent areas, and particularly the west side. These are the backbones where transit really captures over 10% of the overall travel market, kind of reflecting the hub and spoke nature of transit. And then finally, we were able to also plot this map for Uber travel, which is the kind of data that's very unusual to be able to get our hands on. And kind of what we could see is that Uber travel is pretty well dispersed as well, but with clear concentrations around the east side and the airport, as well as a lot of general cross-town travel. There's just not so much overlap between where people are using Uber and people using transit. But in every single area of the region, it's the private car that dominates transit and Uber. Okay. Next slide. We took a look at individual bus routes, and the degree of public spending varies a lot across routes. Of the 72 routes in the SORTA and tank network, 11 had a subsidy for passenger of greater than $10, while only a couple had a subsidy for passenger of greater than $15. Through this exercise, we were able to identify the least productive routes, and these were either coverage style or express style services, typically in the outlying areas of the region. And we found that on-demand style service is potentially competitive on a cost basis with a few of these less productive routes that have a subsidy over $10 per trip. Most Uber trip fares are between $6 and $10. Next slide. And the report contains the deep dive, but we looked at a lot of other regions that have piloted on-demand style services. A couple of examples are Go Monrovia partnership in California with Lyft, Innisfil transit pilot in Ontario with Uber, and each of those involves a public jurisdiction subsidizing pooled ride-hailing. For Monrovia, it's about connecting people to a downtown area and a rail station. In Innisfil, it's about replacing fixed route service altogether. There are many factors involved in the success and failure of certain experiments. Many pilots have struggled over the years. These two appear to be sufficiently popular to endure. And the difficulty they're having is scaling in a cost-effective manner. Because for these kinds of concepts to scale successfully, they need to be both lower subsidy and higher ridership than what they're replacing. And to achieve this, you're really going to need to have a pretty high degree of pooling, combined with a low-cost structure. And there are some indications that TNC pilots are producing those cost savings over a comparable fixed route service, but this is partly because the users are carrying a higher cost burden. They're paying fares that are higher than the transit fare that this service is replacing. Neither Monrovia or Innisfil yet to demonstrate that pool trips can form the majority of overall trips, and so these agencies have decided to scale up these offerings, but part of that is needing to be raising fares and rationing the trips so as to control costs. Next slide. So what are our study's key recommendations? Next slide. We conclude that a successful future for transit in Cincinnati is going to primarily require boosting the fixed route bus system. On-demand can definitely offer some value at the fringes of the system, but not in the core. And so the first three recommendations here are just the fundamentals of doing transit well, and many of those are in place here in Cincinnati. Smart service planning, such as a rapid high-frequency service or expanded crosstown service, could help. Secondly, supportive policies that are known to work elsewhere, such as corridor boarding or off-bus fare payment or integrated regional fare policy and ticketing, Q Transit app, could help. And the third, the physical infrastructure to speed buses along, such as bus lanes or in suburban areas, high-occupancy toll lanes on freeways. Our fourth recommendation is a bit different. It is integrating technology. And so to us, this means two things. One, seamlessly integrate the customer access across non-auto modes like biking and car share, on-demand ride hail, through a joint public-private mobility as a service system, because a combination of all of these modes really is needed to offer a complete and competitive alternative to driving all the different trips that compose a typical week, with the end goal of reducing car ownership. And secondly, under integrated technology, we recommend to provide some targeted funding for on-demand services. Next slide. Because we've seen enough to support the deployment in Cincinnati of this kind of on-demand service on an experimental basis. Now, it's not totally clear whether providing on-demand ride-hailing at both a similar user cost and subsidy level of bus service is realistically achievable. And a lot of that is because it's difficult to obtain the cost information from some of the pilots that have taken place already. So the recommendation is that your agency proceed cautiously through pilot testing and incremental implementation. Specifically, the recommendation is that publicly fund pooled TNC or flexible transit trips where the overall travel demand is either too dispersed or too sporadic for having a productive fixed route bus route, or where the demand is not simply mismatched with transit. So that could be suburb to suburb trips or late evening trips. And the report contains some details of where the pilot might be, but given that your planning staff are the true experts in this region, we've also provided a recipe for identifying a successful pilot area in the report. And this kind of investment comes with a word of warning. There are some known barriers to TNCs like Uber and Lyft adequately serving some underserved people, but those can be overcome by including ADA accessible vehicles, considering fare subsidies for lower income households, accommodating those that are unbanked, and accommodating children who currently cannot hail a ride on Uber. Also marketing the service extensively and reaching out to alert riders and provide full instructions on how to use a service like this is critical that for it to get uptake and for people to know how to use it. Next slide. So what about COVID? The study was completed before the onset of COVID. But from our point of view, the pandemic has only served to accelerate the underlying drivers of the study, which are the steady decline in transit ridership in the very long term, evolving regional needs and travel options, and a desire to lower motor vehicle impacts on congestion and air quality. So, it remains to be seen how durable some of these changes that we're all seeing are going to be, such as telework, social distancing, so on. But we believe public transportation can thrive in the post-COVID era by focusing on the evergreen public needs, providing comfortable service, convenient service, and seamless interoperability across systems and modes, and a system that can adapt to changing travel patterns. So because our recommendations do address these, we think that they stand up well in this post-COVID era. Now, absolutely, some of the ideas proposed here might only come into play as you build back up the system after a round of service cuts potentially. Next slide. So the report is finalized, it's been published. You can download it using the link shown here on the screen. It was a real pleasure to work with your agency and other agencies. I'd like to thank Daryl in particular and Khaled and Mark McEwen for your guidance and support throughout this process. I'm happy to take any questions.
Can I just put a cherry on top before there are questions? I hope that as board members, as you heard Andy going through this, you heard a lot of the things that you as an agency are already doing to implement a stronger reinvented transit system. I think one of the takeaways for me was that on both sides of the river, SORTA and Tank, through their system redesigns and reinventing metro plans, are creating the backbones of a really successful regional transit system. And that what this study does doesn't supplant anything that Reinventing Metro does or says, doesn't supplant anything that Tank System Redesign says or does, but it can inform the future growth of the system, the future improvements of the system. So I hope you heard those things, that there was a lot from an organization like Fair and Peers that say, reaffirming the work that the agency is doing and giving a guidebook forward for that integration of technology.
Thanks, Pete. It's about a 250-page report, right? So I think
Likely.
this morning, but I doubt anybody got a chance to get all the way through it. But we know we need to continue to look for ways to modernize the service we provide and to give the best answers for the community. Is that a question from someone that can't tell me?
My kids are actually waking up right now, so
Totally. Well, thanks, Andy. Did I hear a question or no? A lot of thanks, perhaps no other questions, but thanks a lot for us to review, and we'll continue to build this into how we look at reinventing Metro Plan and what we can do to kind of modernize how we're providing service. We've already talked about pooling or different things we could have done in some of these outlying areas with less density. So good for us to review.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Great. So, I look forward to making it through the whole study, and, I have spent a little bit of time looking through it. But, I'm searching for those recommendations, and eager to hear them. And, I heard some kind of very general things, and that's good. But, I'm also searching for, very specifics. This is something that we should think about doing. And I was wondering if there's anything that you can say to that right now. Yeah, that's the question.
So specifically related to service planning, I would say that we did take a crack at identifying particular markets, particular geographic areas where something like this is going to work. I think a common approach is you essentially identify a cordon, essentially a neighborhood or a couple of neighboring neighborhoods where you subsidize trips that are taken, where you're selecting to pool your Uber trip with other people within that area. And we don't recommend that kind of thing close to the center of the region, because it has the potential to undermine the fixed route transit that's happening. We do recommend it. It seems to be effective kind of as feeder to a high capacity transit line. Those on, something like a BRT or rail isn't prominent in Cincinnati. So the other area that we think it would be very potentially promising is kind of a cordon-based system in maybe an outer suburb. And secondly, we think that the logistics area around the airport, for example, it's a good example of it's very difficult to serve the trip pattern, very difficult to serve with transit, because people come into that area are coming from all across the region. So something like a pool TNC service could very much better serve that complete home to work trip for the kind of outlying employment areas. And then finally, there are some express bus services that really don't go to the downtown. They're kind of across the edge of the region. And those are the ones that we found kind of do have really the highest subsidy per trip, above $10, above $15 per trip. And a pooled ride-hailing style replacement, like along the area that the express bus service serves, is a third promising area for this kind
And
of.
was that for both tank and SORTA?
I think that one, from recollection, was more related to tank.
Blake, I would also point you to supplement H, which is in the 200 page section. There are a couple different geographic areas where it looks at it. Some of them being sort of the western side of Coleraine Township in and outside of the 275 loop. That would feed into some stronger service, and the airport is one Andy mentioned. There are some geographic ideas there that are worth looking at if you're looking at some of the specific geography in the region.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those answers. And I haven't made it to supplement H yet, so thanks, Pete. One other question. As I hear you talk, this is curiosity for me. There's a lot of talk about these programs spatially. Is there any temporal focusing that it's a better idea to do this on weekdays, weekends, morning, evening? Just as we continue to think about it, that's a question that jumped to mind.
Yeah, I think there is a potential to make it temporally focused, because possibly it helps to serve, like I think the bus system currently probably historically is oriented around more of the traditional commute patterns, 9 to 5 jobs, and it's very expensive to run, very good quality transit off hours and on weekends. This kind of an on-demand service can scale to meet the demand on offer. So I think it's particularly useful for those evenings and weekend services. And I can, with the app, it's very easy to implement a program where the subsidies only kick in certain times of the day. So I think absolutely that would be a good use of this kind of service.
We know for sure, right? There's several agencies that sort of used it for overnight type service and things as we think about our 24 hours.
There are, yeah.
Hey, Craig, quick question. Couple comments. Did we pay for the study, or was this through the chamber?
This study was not paid for by SORTA or the chamber. Uber paid for the study.
Okay. Just a comment. I like the approach of integration, but I do believe the cautious is the word I heard. I'm a little skeptical when I hear public-private partnerships, because my past experience has been the public pays, assumes all the risks, where the private profits and assumes little risk. In the age of limited funds, I think we should be careful. I like the public-to-public. I think we should be doing more of that. But I'm very somewhat skeptical of public-private partnership. But I'm looking forward to looking over this study. So thank you, Pete, and thank you for the study.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. And certainly, this presentation wasn't meant to say we're advocating anything at the SORTA level, but just the study's been done. It's going to be public, and so we want to make sure everyone's aware of it and that we can use any insights going forward.
And I think we really do need to pay close attention to how mobility as a service is evolving in our field, in the work that we're doing. It is a huge part of the future of transit, and we need to be responsive and pay close attention to it. Now it's changing. It's changing every day. For example, Uber acquired RouteMatch very recently, and people are very curious about how that's going to play out in the industry in the years to come. So, thank you very much for this study, and I encourage everybody to pay close attention to what is happening here. This is a big part of our future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Blake.
A quick response there to Peter, I believe. We interviewed a few folks from public agencies across the country, MBTA, King County Metro, so on, other experiences with public-private partnerships specifically. So, got some lessons that we've shared for public agencies in Supplement B of the report.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Pete. Any other comments? No. Great stuff. Lots to absorb, and I'm sure we'll build it into our thinking going forward. Pete, thanks for your help in getting issues 7 passed too. You did a lion's share of that work.
Feels like an eternity ago, but it's going to be great.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Thanks. Daryl?
Yes, I have a few things. One, we're talking about Uber. We recently, Pete mentioned, turned the Uber app on to sell bus tickets. And yesterday, our first 4 SORTA tickets were sold in the Uber app. So that's pretty exciting. Last week, we rolled out 2 Metro Strong buses. It's a thank you for the dedication and commitment to the employees of SORTA. If you guys see those on the street, they're completely blue, and they have every single solitary SORTA employee's name on the bus. It is our Metro Strong bus. We have 2 of those buses, one coming out of Queensgate and one coming out of Bond Hill. The employees were extremely pleased. If you've been following social media, many of the employees have posted their pictures with the bus, so we're really excited about that. We've started receiving the new fleet for this year. We've received 19 of the buses, of the 29 buses that we're going to get this year. They look a little different than the other buses. I'm looking forward to the time that we can all get together again in person. So we'll line some of these buses up outside the building, so you guys will be able to see the new 19 buses. We've got 10 more coming this year. You'll be able to see the new fleet. We started requiring masks on our buses, with the exception of children under 6. Everyone else is required to wear a mask. We are having historic OTP months. Our OTP year to date is 86.8%. It is the highest it has been in over 4 years, and continues to raise. We will continue to focus on it to provide better service for our customers. And last but not least, we had one of our employees, Carlos Rowland, who has been here for 42 years, recently retired. I really wish we could be in person so we could do something special for him, although something special is being done for him. But I wanted to take a moment to recognize Carlos's 42 years. His last position here, he was interim director of transit ops. He has done an amazing job for this organization. He actually started here before we were a public organization. So congratulations to Carlos for his 42 years, and we wish him well in his retirement. And that concludes my report, unless you all have any questions.
No, other than to say, I'm glad that the folks that have contracted the virus are well, and I think we continue to see that we don't believe they've contracted it from the buses, right?
No, they've all contracted it from outside of the organization. We've had no employees that have tested positive end up in the hospital at all. They're all doing well. We will stay diligent on cleaning the buses, on PPEs. We'll stay diligent to keep our employees safe.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Daryl? No, a couple things then. On Tuesday, the 21st, from 1:45 to 2:15 p.m., we'll be joining the Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services at their facility at 20 Madison Road for a honk and wave. There will be an access bus and staff members present to encourage traffic to honk in support of the ADA. That same type of activity will happen on the Friday the 24th from 12 to 1 on Government Square. Encouraging folks again to support ADA, and you'll be getting counter invites from Chanel for those events. And then lastly, I know we still want to get together in person for some of these meetings, and we've been working on how we might do that. The on the fact that Hamilton County continues at level 3 in meetings that TJ and team have had with the health department. They're continuing to recommend that we have these meetings virtually until the situation improves. So we'll watch that. We'll intend to have the meeting virtually unless the numbers get better in Hamilton County for next month. Okay. And then finally, I would like to go back. We talked about the budget a little bit, and I want to be clear that the CARES money is an interesting discussion. It can't help us get through the end of this year, but it is a one-time thing, right? We're looking at large deficits through the end of the year, and then certainly deficits versus what we promised from the service levels next year as Remedy Metro Plan was supposed to go moving forward. So that's why every dollar is so important to us and so dear, and so we'll continue to monitor that carefully and why we need to continue to get funding from the sources we've traditionally gotten, because that's a commitment the voters asked us to do and one we're going to have to do our best to deliver on. So more to come as we look at the Remedy Plan next month, but for sure to say that next year's looking as rosy as it did 6 or 9 months ago. Okay. Any comments, questions, new business?
Yeah, Craig, I just wanted to thank the Better Bus Coalition, Troy, and also PG Sittenfeld. They were all down there, I think it was July 7th, for the Driver Appreciation Day, and we were able to hand out water, hand out snacks to the drivers on Government Square. So I want to thank everyone who was there to support the bus drivers.
Thank you, Darius. I know you were there. Appreciate that. Yeah, anything we can do to say thanks is important. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.